On September 11th, 2001, the world stood still. The skies were clear, the sun shone bright over New York City, but within hours, that morning would turn into one of the darkest days in American history. Planes became weapons, buildings became graves, and lives were torn apart in an instant. Amid the chaos, there were voices. Voices that spoke their final words. Voices that reached across fear and fire to say goodbye. This is the story of one of those voices, a last call made from the burning towers, a story that America will never forget. At 8:46 a.m., the first plane struck the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Panic spread like wildfire. Smoke poured into the sky, alarms screamed, and thousands of people rushed to escape. Among them was a man named Brian, a devoted husband and father. He worked on the 104th floor of the North Tower. When the plane hit, his office shook violently. Windows shattered, the lights flickered, and the floor trembled beneath his feet. People screamed, some frozen with fear, others desperately searching for a way out. The stairwells were already crowded, filled with terrified people trying to escape. Brian knew the odds of making it down more than 100 floors were slim, but he tried. With smoke thickening and heat rising, he and a few colleagues tried to push through the stairwell, but soon the air grew unbearable. They were trapped. With nowhere left to go, he turned back toward his desk, pulled out his phone, and dialed the only number that mattered. His wife, Emily. The line crackled, and Emily answered with confusion in her voice. "Brian, are you okay? What's happening?" She had just seen the news on television, but she couldn't believe her husband was inside. Brian's voice shook, but he tried to stay calm. "Emily, listen to me. Something terrible has happened. The building. It's bad. I don't think I'm going to make it out." Emily's heart sank. Tears filled her eyes. "No, don't say that. You'll be fine. Just keep moving, please." She begged him not to give up, to find another way, but deep down, she could hear in his voice the truth he was too brave to fully admit. Around him, chaos filled the air. Alarms, cries, the sound of fire raging closer. But in that moment, Brian's world shrank to just the sound of his wife's voice. "I love you," he whispered. "Tell the kids I love them. Tell them their dad will always be with them." Emily's sobs grew louder. "No, please, don't say goodbye. You'll come home. You promised me you'd take Daniel to his baseball game this weekend. You promised me." Brian's throat tightened. He wanted more than anything to keep that promise, but time was running out. He could feel the heat rising, the smoke filling his lungs. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I wanted forever with you. But if I can't have forever, I want you to remember this. My last thought, my last breath, it's all about you. You gave me the best life, you gave me love, and you gave me our children. Thank you for everything." On the other end, Emily clutched the phone as if holding onto him, her tears falling uncontrollably. She told him she loved him over and over again, hoping somehow her words could reach through the smoke and the fire, hoping somehow love could shield him. And then, silence. The line went dead. At 10:28 a.m., the North Tower collapsed, sending shockwaves through the city and the world. Brian's voice was gone, but his last call lived on, etched into the heart of his family forever. Emily held on to those words for the rest of her life. She raised their children with the memory of their father's courage and his love. She told them about his strength, about the way his final moments were not about fear, but about family. His last call became a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable terror, love was stronger. Across the city and the country, similar stories echoed. Dozens of men and women trapped in the towers, on the planes, or in the Pentagon made their last calls that day. They didn't call for help. They didn't call for money. They didn't call for power. They called the people they loved most. They called to say, "I love you." They called to say goodbye. That is the legacy of 9/11. Not just the destruction, not just the loss, but the love that rose above it all. The world saw the worst of humanity that day, but it also saw the best. The firefighters who climbed into burning towers, the strangers who helped each other escape, and the families who found strength in the last words of their loved ones. Emily often said that her husband's last call saved her, even though it broke her. It gave her the strength to go on, to live not just for herself, but for the children they had promised to raise together. "When I feel weak," she would tell them, "I remember his voice, I remember his love, and I remember that he wanted us to live." Years later, as memorials rose and stories were told, the world learned about those final phone calls. They were not calls of panic, but calls of love. They were reminders that in our final moments, what matters most is not what we owned, not what we achieved, but who we loved and how we loved them. The last call from 9/11 is more than a memory, it is a lesson. A lesson that life is fragile, that time is precious, and that love is the one thing even tragedy cannot destroy. Today, as Americans gather each year to remember, they honor not only the heroes who ran into danger, but also the voices of those who could not escape. The voices that said, "I love you," one last time. The voices that turned unbearable tragedy into eternal love. Brian's story is just one of thousands, but it represents them all. His last call was not just for Emily, not just for his children, it was for all of us. A reminder to cherish the people we hold dear, to never take a single day for granted, and to always say, I love you, because we never know when it might be the last chance. America will never forget that day. It will never forget the towers, the smoke, the heroes, or the pain. But above all, it will never forget the voices, the last calls that spoke of love in the face of death. Because in the end, that is what remains. That is what survives. That is what unites us. And so, when the sun rises each September 11th, we remember. We remember the lives lost, the heroes made, and the calls that carried love beyond the flames. We remember Brian's voice, Emily's tears, and the children who grew up knowing that their father's final words were words of love. This is the last call from 9/11, a story America will never forget.